On today's episode of Let's Find a Niche, we have Stahl, one of the more forgotten units in the game for a pretty good reason. Stahl doesn't have anything outstanding in terms of stats. Likewise, his preferred weapon is held back by his base, which makes him really hard to use in a lot of cases. However, he's not half bad with a lot of investment. And granted, you could say that about most units in the game, but I think for Stahl in particular, there is a bit of merit to it. Looking at his stats with a base attack of 31, it's not really the most impressive, especially by today's standards. However, he does have a speed stat at 26 and it comes with a super boost, so it is workable by all means. Then he has a defense stat of 30, which is not bad, and a low res stat at 22, with a good amount of HP at 45. And if you were to plus 10 him with max flowers, he would end up with 38 base attack and 32 speed with 37 defense, which isn't bad by any means, it's just really outdated. And on top of that, if you were to add Panther Sword to his arsenal, it would become 54. And while that does seem low on the surface, you gotta remember what Panther Sword does. Effectively, it's an enemy phase brave weapon, which is extremely strong on its own. However, the reason we don't see Stahl as much as other units is because A, its base is Triangle Depth, which hurts a lot of matchups, and B, there are just better units you could use. However, if you do want to use Stahl, you do have a lot of options for him. For example, in Aether Raids. In Aether Raids, we can make use of Panther Sword in offense, and then we could use a different weapon for defense. For offense, we're going to be using Panther Sword with Glimmer, Distant Counter, Vantage, Pulse Smoke, and Attack Defense solo. As long as he can set up in the enemy phase, he should have no problem getting Glimmer procs off as well as dealing with foes. However, because his base effect is Triangle Depth, he's not really going to be able to take down blues by any means. And to be fair, even if it didn't have Triangle Depth, it probably would be a bit harder. However, he could definitely take down greens and probably some reds with the right investment or supports. Glimmer or Moonbow, it's interchangeable which two cooldown special you want. I personally go with Glimmer because if you have a higher attack stat than the foe's defense, and you can end up dealing a lot more damage. However, you can really go either way. Then you have Distant Counter, which is basically a must-have for melee units like Stahl, who require the ability to attack ranged foes, which happen to be the most common archetype in Aether Raids defense. Vantage, obviously, so you can take out foes before he falls, because even with 36 defense, he's not really the most bulky unit. The HP helps him a lot, so he can prevent one-shots on himself. However, he's still going to struggle a lot if he can't set up. So, honestly, outside of Hardy Bearing, he should probably be fine. But Hardy Bearing is relatively common, so you'll have to pick your poison. And then you have Pulse Smoke, which is obviously another must-have. Or not a must-have, but it's another one of those staple skills for Aether Raids because of turn 1 specials, so on and so forth. However, the meta is currently moving towards turn 1 teams, so it's going to be harder for you to set up, as well as having Pulse Smoke be useful. So you could probably replace that with something else, like maybe an Oath or a Rouser, whatever works. And attack defense solo, so he can set up against bows, get more defense, get more attack. All the works. And then for his defense build, we have Brave Sword, Escutcheon, Deathblow 4, Attack Defense Near Trace, Panic Smoke, and Deflect Melee. This is just more of a way to set up a Wings of Mercy beacon for him, because with Escutcheon and Deflect Melee, he's going to be able to take on any foe, pretty much, as long as they're not dragons, or they're not close counter mages, which aren't really the most common, but can be a problem. If he does fall under half HP, then he can easily move out of the way with Attack Defense Near Trace because it adds one more movement, and then you can have units Wings of Mercy in, which can be really, really nice, whether or not he goes back one space, one to the side, so on and so forth. And you can always stack Death Blows. It doesn't have to be Death Blow 4 by any means, it's just more firepower for him. And then Panic Smoke just so you can panic your foes, which, I mean, is good. This build is basically a survival build, just depends on him surviving a lot of the time. However, if you're not very confident with using Stahl in that regard, you could always build a Conrad with the same build essentially, minus Trace, or any other slow Lance Cav, or anything of the sort really. You have plenty of options, basically. And then we move on to Arena. Arena is going to be a bit more tricky because I don't think you should run him as your score bot, even though he has access to Red Dual Cavalry 4. I don't think he really works all that well as a main score unit. You can use him for one. You can use him as one, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Rather, I think you should use 2 builds for Arena Assault instead. The first one being Panther Sword again with DC Vantage Moonbow, Joint Drive Attack, and then a Brazen. The Brazen obviously to synergize with the Vantage, so you can get more attack and defense. This is really just more so to take down very strong greens such as Legendary Celica, Brave Edelgard, Legendary Edelgard, so on and so forth. However, if you're more worried about the Fallen Edelgard, then this build right here will do you wonders. You have Armor Smasher with the dual effect, Ruptured Sky, Sturdy Stance 3, Lull Attack Defense, Fatal Smoke, and Quick Riposte 3. Stahl has more than enough speed to double naturally, but because of Fallen Edelgard's ability to disable follow-ups, you're going to want something in the enemy phase that can guarantee a follow-up, such as Quick Riposte, as that will just become the speed check, and Stahl will not fail by any means. Even at a +0, it shouldn't be hard to double her it shouldn't be hard to double her with just speed and then Quick Riposte. The reason we have Ruptured Sky here is you'll want some sort of support that can probably accelerate his cooldown much more. If you do have it, maybe like a Brave Lucina of sorts for Arena Assault, this would be really great for taking them out. Sturdy Stance 3 because you want to stack defense and you want more attack with Armor Smasher. This should allow him to deal with Fallen Edelgard. However, if you are worried about it, you could always go with Vantage in the B slot instead. So if she does end up surviving, you can then retaliate with 1 more attack, and then that should do it. And then you also have Fatal Smoke just so you can prevent her healing. This is basically an anti-Fallen Edelgard build, but you can use this against other armors that aren't magical based like dragons or probably blue, because his attack is still shaky. But either way, it's not bad by any means, and I do think that it's something that Stahl is able to do because of his relatively okay attack. But you're going to need Armor Smasher. You may not necessarily need Sturdy Stance 3, you could probably get away with Sturdy Stance 2, but you'll definitely need Quick Riposte, that for sure. And Fatal Smoke is optional, depending on the build, but most of the time you should probably be able to get away with any other skill. And then finally we have some PvE builds. We have one that's more enemy phase oriented, and then we have one that's more player phase oriented. The first one is a Gale Force set with Cake Cutter, Swift Sparrow, Speed, Defense, Near Trace, Attack Smoke, and Heavy Blade. Swift Sparrow 3 is just a really nice skill to have because of the attack and speed he gains from it. Cake Cutter gives him even more attack and speed because it's Swift Sparrow as well. And same thing with Speed, Defense, Near Trace. It lowers the foe's defense and speed during combat, which is awesome. And we have Heavy Blade and the Seal because he needs some way of accelerating his cooldown for Gale Force. So once you get that going, that shouldn't be an issue. However, if you are concerned about him making his Heavy Blade checks, you can run Attack Smoke and lower the foe's attack even more after the first combat, obviously. And then it goes from there, basically. You Gale Force on the next unit, and then you can get out of there with Trace. I would say it's solid overall. You can replace his Trace with Lull if you want to. The B is flexible, I just think Trace is the best option for him. You could also go with Attack Defense near Trace, but I also think he may want to secure doubles more, so that's why I went with Speed. But you could probably go with either. And then his enemy phase set is going to incorporate Panther Sword again, except this time we're going to make it so he could take on blue units with Cancel Affinity and his B, Steady Posture 3, Attack Smoke again, Ignis, and Attack Speed Solo 3. Now, the Seal was supposed to be Speed Defense, but you could probably go with either. If you feel like he has enough defense, then by all means go with Attack Speed, otherwise go the Speed Defense Seal. It wasn't in the builder for some reason, but we have that as a seal, just to keep it in mind. And basically the idea is because he has no speed penalty and it's enemy phase Brave, he could potentially quad and then proc Ignis, which is the idea we're going for here. Basically an enemy will attack, that's 3 cooldown for Ignis, Stahl will attack 4 times, 3 to 2, 2 to 1, 1 the special, and then the 4th hit is Ignis. That should do you really well. Cancel Affinity is going to be required, so you can cancel out his Triangle Adept base. I'm hoping in the future we could get a seal for this, because that would actually make him way better than he is now. But with Steady Posture 3, he should have enough defense, and he should be able to at least 1 round KO with Ignis Or maybe even without Ignis, you never know. But that depends really on what you're using as a seal, because otherwise he may or may not need it. And that's about it for Stahl. Stahl is unfortunately one of the units that got the bitter end of a refine because of his base. The thing is that his refine is actually really strong, because it's a 16 might enemy phase brave weapon. However, it's held down by Triangle Adept, so if we ever do get Cancel Affinity in the future as a seal, then Stahl would actually become really good. That being said, he would still face competition from other dual phase brave or enemy phase brave units, but that's a whole different issue on its own. Either way, if you like Stahl or you use Stahl, let me know how you think. Let me know what you think of these builds. Do you think they suck? Do you think they're good? Let me know what you use for your Stahl, if you have one. If you like the video, like it. It always helps. Subscribe. But yeah, until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.